Hello friends, it's Raw Chicken Nuggies. You might not know me, but I really love GTFO. It's a game that I've recently started putting a lot of time into, and I feel like what draws me further into the game is both the difficulty and the high skill ceiling. All I want is for the game to grow, but a huge barrier of entry, especially for newer players, is the daunting amount of time and knowledge needed to reach a base level proficiency if you're trying to figure everything out on your own. Reaching the heights of that skill ceiling might be a monumental task at first, but I assure you that a lot of it is muscle memory, situational awareness, and knowledge of the game's mechanics. This video is the first in what I hope will become an educational series that is intended to help players of all skill levels understand GTFO's mechanics a little better. As a beginner to this game, there's a lot of game knowledge that might seem to be universally understood by veterans, but not necessarily explained anywhere in detail. When I first started out, I was blessed to play with people that were both really knowledgeable about the in-depth game mechanics and willing to teach me. But not everyone might be that fortunate coming into it. I'm just here to pay it forward. The GTFO community has already released a number of incredibly informative guides as to how to improve in the game, many of which I will be referencing as we go along, but my main reason for making these videos is to delve into a lot of these more subtle skills that I learned, and compile them into one relatively comprehensive series, so as to expedite your learning as a player. For this video, we're going to focus on something that I see a lot of people in the game struggle with: kiting and hammer clearing. Please note that a lot of the techniques I include in this video are more anecdotal rather than an exact science. Maybe someone with a more systematic brain than me knows the numbers, but I'm going to do my best to give as detailed an answer to my approaches as possible. One last thing before we start. This video was made during Rundown 4. If any of these mechanics or techniques change in the future, I will make a note in the description or in a pinned comment. Let's go into a bit of my mentality before we get into the mechanics. When I first started out, I'm gonna be honest with you, I rarely used my hammer outside of trying to stealth. When things hit the metaphorical fan, I would pull out my gun instinctively to shoot, because that's what I was used to as someone who played a lot of FPS prior to GTFO. Guns are powerful, and they're not meant to be discounted. However, one thing that is incredibly important to always keep in mind when playing this game is the opportunity cost of using resources. Yes, you may have been able to clear the room right now and gotten out of immediate danger, but now you have less ammo for impending danger. Take alarm doors for instance. They're unskippable, forced loud sections. You can't stealth it, and oftentimes you need to shoot in order to clear it successfully, as you're forced to stand in a fixed place for a set amount of time in order to complete static scans, which are the red circles on the floor. As you go further down into the depths of GTFO, these scans become harder for a number of reasons, whether it's the quantity or the type of scan. We'll look at scans in another video, but the point that I wanted to make here is that resource management is key, yet often overlooked. If you can stealth or even hammer a room after it's been woken up, you're essentially saving a finite resource for a part of the mission that you will likely be forced to use it in. Nothing feels worse than getting to an alarm door and realizing that you spent all your ammo in the previous rooms and now you have a horde on top of you, with nothing to defend yourself with, as you stand in place questioning why the scans go so slowly. Long story short, I try to hammer when I can, unless I'm in absolute danger. 4 people clearing a room with hammers goes much more quickly than you think and saves you a ton of ammo. I like to visualize each situation I'm in as a puzzle, with an answer to help me get out of each scenario while mitigating HP or ammo loss. When hammer clearing and a sleeper approaches me, I see one of 4 options: evade, hit, shove, or shoot. My positioning, the number of enemies, and the type of enemies influences my decision toward one of these 4 options. Shooting is really a last resort for me most of the time, or if I feel there are priority targets in the room that need to be taken down quickly, so we'll stick to explaining the other 3 options for the time being. Evasion is a very key skill to learn when dealing with both small and large numbers of enemies. Let's start off by answering the question: what is kiting?
Why are you running? Why are you running?
There's quite a long history of kiting throughout a number of other games, but my definition of kiting in GTFO is utilizing your movement options in order to force enemies to chase you and miss attacks. When doing so, you reposition yourself in a more advantageous position and keep yourself mobile so that you are not a stationary target. Understanding how to use your movement to your advantage while hammering is a key part of mitigating damage. In a future video, I'll go into detail regarding the finer aspects of movement in GTFO, but for time's sake, I'll give you a basic explanation for this video. There are 3 key features of movement that help you elude your enemies. 1. Pathing. 2. Jumping. 3. Sliding. Strikers target your body hitbox when they attack, so jumping, which shifts your hitbox into an arc in the air, can help you dodge a few more attacks. Sliding, which is executed by crouching after gaining enough running momentum, makes you slightly faster if cancelled after its starting animation by uncrouching, so it helps you gain distance on sleepers or get out of range of their attacks. One thing to note is that unlike strikers, shooters target your head hitbox. Sliding shifts your head hitbox lower to the floor momentarily, which is massively helpful when dodging shooters' attacks. Out of these 3 concepts, pathing is probably the most important to understand and implement, but is a bit more complex than the other 2. In order to understand effective pathing, we need to break it down a bit more and look at sleeper behavior. Captain Alpha put out a really good guide on how to hammer clear common enemies, as well as dodge their attacks. I'll link his video below and summarize some takeaways. Small strikers make a specific sound when locking onto a target, which is then followed by a tongue attack. You can envision their attack range as a rectangular hitbox in front of them, which slightly extends into their body. This means 2 things. They are weak to lateral movements, and movements that pass through them. While the latter is somewhat less consistent, the former is incredibly reliable. Basically, all you need is 5 steps in one direction in order to get out of a small sleeper's tongue attack range. In fact, you don't even need to be running to fully clear their range. If you have higher speed, then it's easier to get out of range, which is where running and sliding play a big part in evading tongues. Another key factor in dodging sleeper attacks is using verticality and obstruction. Sleepers cannot jump and will only follow routes that can be traversed by walking. What this means for you is that you can take shortcuts with jumping in order to gain distance. I like to think of the game being similar to Mirror's Edge. I'm always looking for ways to break line of sight or traverse terrain in order to dodge enemies. Since their pathing doesn't allow them to jump up and over obstacles, use this to your advantage to leave sleepers in the dust. While not 100% consistent, you can also use obstacles to block tongue attacks when you break line of sight behind them. Once you are able to combine all of these evasion tactics, you too can start to kite large groups of enemies like my friend Salas here. With evasion out of the way, let's dial it back a bit to discuss hammering enemies. We need to briefly go over enemy stats. If you don't care about the finer details and just want the practical summary, please skip forward to the timestamp indicated to get the TLDR. Sleepers' weak points are in the back and the head, and hitting them in the occiput, which is the back of the head, stacks both bonus multipliers additively. Small strikers take 5 non-critical 0-charge hits anywhere in the body to kill, while small shooters take 8 hits. Even though small shooters have a higher base health pool, they have a higher headshot multiplier, making them more vulnerable to weak point damage. While both small strikers and shooters can be 0-charge killed in the occiput, a general rule of thumb for these sleepers is that a half charge to the head from the front will kill both strikers and shooters, and is the most time effective way to kill smalls when they're aggroed, as they will generally be facing you. All small sleepers are relatively easy to evade and hammer down with minimal loss of HP and without the need to shoot. So if there's a small number of them, and I'm not under some sort of time pressure, I will try to hammer them. Another thing to keep in mind while hammering enemies is targeting priority. Small strikers do 12% damage per tongue, while small shooters deal 5% damage per shot. What this means is that for the most part, small strikers should be your priority when clearing groups of smalls, as they are a higher risk. Situationally, I will kill small shooters first if there are a sizable number. When I hit enemies, I'm looking for one of two things: damage or stagger. Common enemies in this game generally stagger whenever an extremity is broken or a certain charge threshold is passed, which is usually 50% or above. The latter is untrue for big enemies, as they are specifically limited to extremity breaks, but we'll keep this to smalls for the time being. I have two mindsets when hammering down groups of enemies. If I have no charge, I'm very much thinking of evading until my half charge is complete. Once I have my half charge, I'm looking to hit an enemy with the intent to kill with a headshot. Cycling back and forth between these two modes is very critical when hammering larger groups of enemies, as they pose a higher damage risk. One good habit to develop is to always be charging your hammer so you're ready to hit at any time. I know this is counterintuitive in a game meant to be horror, but be the hunter. Aim to be lethal and elusive. There's also the concept of hit selection. There are what I like to call safe hits and risky trades. Once the enemy attacks, there's a short cooldown until it can attack again. Hitting the enemy with your hammer during this time is considered safe because you are at no risk of taking damage. A risky trade is attacking while the attack is no longer on cooldown, or even during their attack startup animation. If you miss the hit or don't stagger them, then you're almost guaranteed to take damage. The trade-off, however, is that your clear times are quicker and you're able to maneuver more freely during hammer clear sections. Practicing both will make your hammer skills improve by leaps and bounds and sharpen your judgment. Shoving, which is executed either by your right click when your melee is equipped, or default keybind C regardless of what is currently equipped, is an often underutilized tool in your arsenal. Even though it's a bit situational, I've been training myself to use it more often because it's very helpful when trying to mitigate damage or get yourself out of some sticky situations. In situations where you're kiting, oftentimes there are enemies that have split off from the pack and are perhaps in front of you. One incredible use case for shoving is to both prevent damage and gather enemies behind you by shoving a straggler that is in front of you. I find shoving also useful when you hammer kill an enemy, but don't have time to evade or stagger another enemy in time. Simply shove the other when he's in a tunneling animation, and you can reposition or build charge. I hope everyone that watches this video takes something out of it that they can apply to their own gameplay in order to improve. Again, I plan to make this a series where we delve a bit more into the finer details of the game, but if you have any questions regarding what we covered here, please don't hesitate to leave questions in the comments below. If you like this video and want to catch me doing dumb things in the game live, head over to twitch.tv/rawchickennuggies. I'm always happy to see new and returning faces, so just come say hi to your boy. Peace.